After all those Halloween videos, I don't know what I can really do next. I really want to talk about this game, but I also want to talk about this anime. But then again, I also gotta work on my Go No Go anime this month. Not to mention there's this other video I gotta do in a few days after. What should I do now when it comes to 2D American animation? If only there was a classic animated series made in the US that has some license interconnections. Oh wait, I think I have an idea. But oh boy, is it gonna cost me some money? I don't think many people mind as long as I actually liked it. I didn't like it. Now, when a lot of people generally think of animation, the 90s was basically the king when it came to Warner Brothers, creating one of the most iconic and well-known next-generation Looney Tune cartoons, Tiny Toon Adventures. However, after the series' run, Fox and Warner Brothers decided to create the next best thing, what people generally call the most iconic cartoon of the 90s, the Animaniacs, a cartoon made by Tom Ruegger in 1993 and was produced by Steven Spielberg, because of course he needs all the credit he gets. I mean, the show is literally called Steven Spielberg Presents the Animaniacs. The cartoon itself was a variety show featuring tons of different wacky cartoons, such as Pinky and the Brain, who later got their own series, Rita and Runt, The Good Feathers, Slappy Squirrel, and who could forget the most iconic characters of the franchise, Minerva Mink. I'm kidding, of course, I'm talking about the Warner Brothers, Yakko and Wacko, and the Warner sister, Dot, and how they get themselves into wacky antics and tomfoolery. The Animaniacs had had a massive following even after the show's run, and even got it a reboot back in 2020, and on Hulu of all streaming networks. Probably the only reason to actually own Hulu. And with Season 2 available now, I bet you anything you probably found this video after watching the second season. However, a lot of people don't really talk about is the merchandising of the Animaniacs, or as I usually tend to talk about, the video games of the series. Which, surprisingly enough, Animaniacs didn't really have that many video games, at least compared to Tiny Toons. I was thinking of maybe doing an entire video on all the Animaniacs games, but I don't really own any of the consoles some of them are available on, finding the cartridges would be a pain in the butt, and of course I don't know how to emulate. However, I feel like there is one Animaniacs game a lot of people generally look over and talk about from time to time, but I've never really done an in-depth review on. And no, I don't mean Animaniacs 10-Pin Alley, probably one of the weirdest licensed games on the PlayStation. Nope, what I'm actually talking about is 2005's Animaniacs The Great Edgar Hunt. And yes, this is a full-fledged authentic copy I actually found and paid $90 for. Though, surprisingly enough, it's actually cheaper on the PlayStation 2, which is only exclusive in the PAL region. So I bet you're probably wondering, how did I get Animaniacs The Great Edgar Hunt for $90, considering it goes for usually double that price? Well, this isn't a sponsored video, but I should let you guys know I actually found this on Mercari.com. It's an online shopping network somewhat similar to other ones like Amazon or eBay, but I think this one actually does a little better. You can actually make offers on some items that you can sell, meaning you can actually get them for much cheaper than you think. I usually find a lot of my rare video games in my collection usually here, and if you aren't happy with your order, you can get a money-back guarantee. Anyways, back to the review. Animaniacs The Great Edgar Hunt was released on May 27th of 2005 on the Nintendo GameCube and the Xbox in the US. And surprisingly enough, the US releases of this game are the most valuable for some reason. I cannot for the life of me find an Xbox version. But then again, I don't own an Xbox either. So of course I had to go with the GameCube version. I would have gone PlayStation 2, but sadly it's exclusive in the PAL region. And I'm from America. The game was developed by Warthog Games, a company known for making a lot of Warner Brothers licensed games during the early 2000s between 1997, its founding, to 2006, to its closing. Also, they made a game called Sticky Balls. Just want to let you know there. However, there are two different publishers for The Great Edgar Hunt. UTV Ignition Games, who also help publish other games such as Puyo Pop Fever, Muramasa the Demon Blade, and Deadly Premonition. That's actually a surprising license list, considering the company was liquidated and ceased operations in 2012. The other publisher is Conspiracy Entertainment. If you don't know who that is, they helped make Data Design interactive games. Yes, those ones. And they also made a series known as Kokoto. So it's gonna be hard to tell what's to actually come of this game. This is also one of the biggest weird things about this game, is that this came out roughly 10 years after the show was over. The show roughly ended around 1996, and for some reason 2005 was a good time to bring back the Animaniacs in video game format. Funnily enough, I actually still remember the G4 review of this game. But enough nostalgia glasses, let's see whether or not the Great Edgar Hunt is worth hunting for. To start things off, the game plays a poorly rendition of the Animaniacs theme. So you mean to tell me they got the license to use the Animaniacs, yet they didn't have the license to use the Animaniacs theme song? I think this might be a red herring of what may soon to become. Oh, I also forgot to mention that the game also references that it's not just the Animaniacs, it's also the Animaniacs featuring Pinky and the Brain. Even though they've been part of the Animaniacs since the beginning of the series, they just had their own TV show. Twice. So let's begin with the story of the game. The game takes place during what's called the Edgar Awards, a joke of course on the Academy Awards, and a film director named C.C. DeVille steals all 45 Edgars and threatens to melt them all down unless studio chairman Thaddeus Plotz gives him a lucrative contract making movies as bad as M. Night Shyamalan. But DeVille's dim-witted assistant named Jinx, don't bother asking how I know this information because honestly he doesn't care, who's a major klutz and crashes DeVille's getaway blimp into the Warner Brothers water tower, causing almost all but one of the stolen Edgars to get launched all across the Warner movie lot. This also accidentally releases the Warner Brothers and the Warner sister, Yakko, Wakko, and Dot, from their water tower prison. The game begins, and Wakko and Dot disappear after the opening cutscene. Where did they go? Okay, I'm gonna first start off with the first problem with this story. For starters, let's look at the villain C.C. DeVille. Believe it or not, this is not a reoccurring Animaniacs character. This is an original. And it's not even a good joke on anything I could find. The only joke I could find is that that's actually the name of the lead guitarist of the rock band Poison. Also, why couldn't they use a character from the show? Maybe Death, Satan, or even that one pilgrim asking him to give him the bird. Well, they would love to, but the Fox censors wouldn't allow it. Neither would YouTube. Secondly, where did Wakko and Dot even go? And here's the biggest question, why are they hunting Edgars? So this is actually a major thing that's never properly introduced. Yakko, Wakko, and Dot apparently agreed to search for the Edgars in order to save the Edgar ceremony. Yet it's never once properly introduced why they say this. In the game, it just shows the Warners just collecting them because it's a Collect-a-thon, which I guess is something I should probably explain. This game is a Collect-a-thon similar to Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. Of course, starting the game at the hub world, which is the Warner movie lots. And yes, they're playing that poorly done rendition of the Animaniacs theme. Apparently you run into a cowboy, not an actor playing a cowboy, a real cowboy apparently, and apparently Dot actually went to one of the movie lots in a cowboy-themed world called Ye Old West. So playing as Wakko, you have to basically go around and find collectibles. The main, of course, being the Edgars, and that's going to be the main item you're going to be finding throughout the game to order progress through world to world. I'll generally admit the controls of the game aren't actually that bad, and even for a 3D platformer of the 2000s. The Warners have a triple jump, they can do a glide, they can do a ground pound, and they also can squeak around. Yakko uses a hammer, Wakko uses a glove, and Dot uses a frying pan. But there are also additional gadgets you'll unlock later on in the worlds. Some of them you'll get from people throughout the game, and there are some you'll have to unlock through, well, I best explain in the world structure of the game. Of course, starting off in the Wild Wild West, you need to collect a total of 3 Edgars in order to face the first boss of the game. And to collect Edgars, there are actually a variety of ways to do it. The first is going through the main game, and people will give you missions, and if you successfully do that mission, they'll give you an Edgar as a reward. The second is through world-specific items. There's basically these small little MacGuffins that apparently transform into an Edgar that appears really close to you. You can get up to 2 Edgars per world thanks to these items, but the catch is you have to get every single one of these little MacGuffins. And trust me, finding every single one of them can get extremely annoying. Though luckily, I did learn near the end of the game, apparently there's a little beacon that'll blink when you get close to certain collectibles. So at least that helps you try to find them, but there are some that are hidden in the most obscure and ridiculous of places. One of the other Edgars I actually discovered was actually in a small rat cage, which will be a reoccurring thing that appears throughout each world because these are Pinky and the Brain minigames. This is how they introduce Pinky and the Brain in this game. They're little minigames that'll help Yakko, Wakko, and Dot progress the level. by using their evil plan to take over the world, using some ridiculous reason, just like in the show at least, but the problem being they don't actually go through with it to the end. And this is actually how you collect half of the gadgets in this game. Since this was the first world, your first mission was to collect horseshoes, and by the end they would give you an Edgar for some reason. The second world, known as Spooky Movie, which of course is a Haunted Mansion based themed one, with ridiculous placement of damage dealing doodads, and where you also unlock Wacko and fight a Frankenstein's Bride version of Hello Nurse, gives you probably one of the worst Pinky in the Brain minigames out here, where you have to guide one of 3 bombs into the center of the earth, and it is an obscure, obnoxious, annoying maze. But it's mandatory in order to unlock the most important item in the game, a shovel. And why do I think the shovel's so important? It's because, well, most of the collectibles you're going to need to find throughout the game, the world-specific ones, and some Edgars too, are hidden underground, so you have to press a specific button for a specific character. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can only choose from one of the 3 Warners once you unlock them after defeating the boss. After defeating the train conductor after a entirely annoying train heist, you get to play as Dot, who, I kid you not, has the least amount of playtime in the entire game. Dot's voice actress must be pissed. Ironically enough, the characters you'll be using the most is my favorite, Wacko. You don't unlock until the second world, but once when you obtain the shovel, it's practically mandatory you play as Wacko through 80% of the game. Because the logic of the 3D platforming in this game uses the same style as Donkey Kong 64, only worse. Yeah, I said it. They somehow made a DK64 with less characters do worse than the original, and I like DK64. That's mostly because some of the Warners have item-specific items that'll allow them to get through different situations. Yakko has bombs, which he'll blow stuff up to get to different areas, and Dot gets a hula skirt, which she does a limbo-based minigame, and I kid you not, you only use this ability roughly 5 times throughout the entire game, making Dot one of the most useless characters in this game until it's mandatory, or if you need to backtrack in case you missed something important. The other collectibles are usually found in other Pinky in the Brain minigames, or even by some people, such as the suction cups will make you climb walls super slowly, the beginning of the fantasy world Once Upon a Time, and a talking fish gives you a snorkel gear, which apparently has a leak, so you can't stay underwater for long, but that's a flat out lie. I kid you not, I actually stayed underwater for 5 minutes straight, and nothing ever happened to any of the Warners. I didn't drown, there was no death animation whatsoever. You also get a Ghostbusters weapon at the Spooky Movie world at the very beginning, and just so you can use it against certain ghosts, and a specific boss fight, and against a giant dragon in the fantasy world. In other situations, I honestly can't remember. You also unlock night vision goggles, which makes looking at the screen even more unbearable, especially in the dark, because the green just kind of hurts your eyes. And lastly, the magnifying glass. So you're probably wondering, what does the magnifying glass even do? This is actually an item to help you find another collectible in each and every world. And that other collectible is another iconic character from the Animaniacs, Chicken Boo. No, I'm not making a joke. It literally is Chicken Boo. I'll generally say this is probably the most clever collectible in the entire game. Chicken Boo is hidden in every single world disguised as a specific enemy, so you use the magnifying glass to actually look at the chicken feet around the stage. After hitting a specific enemy, it'll turn into Chicken Boo and he'll drop an Edgar and run away. I feel like this ability doesn't activate until you get the magnifying glass, so if you keep hitting enemies, you'll accidentally find Chicken Boo by pure accident. That actually happened to me once. I'm not joking. So here's now a good question. Take a guess how many in-game model characters of the Animaniacs are there in this game? Well, obviously you got Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, you've got Pinky in the Brain, you've got Chicken Boo, you've got Hello Nurse in every single world in a unique design, like Cleopatra in the Epic world, which was a half Egyptian, half Roman world. It also features probably one of my favorite characters in this game, a man in a cell who curses while in prison in an E10 game.
Help me get out of this cell, would you? Those Romans have enslaved me and my 3 friends. Ow! The darn smash work!
And Dr. Scratch and Sniff, who appears twice in the game, first as the mad scientist who makes the Hello Nurse Frankenstein Bride, also second making a flying machine in the Epic world. And if you collect a certain amount of items, you'll actually create a certain thing for a certain situation. And that totals up to a total of 8 characters from the entire Animaniacs lineup who have actual models in the game. And before anyone in the comments who's actually played this game references Mr. Plotz or even Ralph, they don't show a model of them at all in the game. They're only just audio characters. And yes, I know there are some images of some characters hidden in the screens of some parts of the Warner movie lot, but those are Easter eggs, not actual in-game models. In fact, that's my biggest problem with this game. It doesn't feel like an Animaniacs 3D platformer. I'm generally being dead serious when I say this. You could replace the Warners with any character you want, whether they be original or Bubsy for absurd reasons, and you'd still get the same game plot no matter what. And as an Animaniacs fan, that just flat out frustrates me. You make a licensed Animaniacs game, yet you don't do anything with the Animaniacs product. You can't even get the license for the main theme song of the game. Not to mention the game was made roughly 10 years after the show ended, and the reboot aired in 2020. Who was this game made for? Well, I guess Animaniacs fans, even though the game itself is not even Animaniacs related. Luckily the controls aren't super broken or bad, except for some reason I lost Red Riding Hood in the woods, and she would not leave the woods for some reason. And I will generally admit, the humor in the game is really good, but then again, when you have the original voices of the Warner Brothers and the sister, of course it would be generally funny, at least in the cutscenes. In-game, sadly, they don't really use any additional idle animation voice sounds. They just repeat certain lines when they collect collectibles, which is apples for some reason, to represent their health, and they only repeat what they use their special abilities for. And they never shut
Yummy.
up.
I thought we never break for lunch.
It's the same 3 lines every time they grab an apple, and the same single line every time you hear them use a special item. And you get really tired, especially since you have to keep shoveling with Wacko, so you have to keep hearing him say,
I can sing it, baby.
over and over and over again. At least the cutscenes at least get me a good laugh from time to time, such as they're making fun of this lemur.
My name is Marvin. I'm the head scriptwriter here.
You write scripts on people's heads?
That must be uncomfortable for them.
What kind of pen do you use?
Who also tells you to collect these types of scripts throughout the world, because of course you have to collect them in order to get an Edgar. There's one in each world, so finding one in every single world will give you that one single Edgar. This is also another problem I have with the game, especially since we're near the end of the game. So the worlds of the game also don't really help the situation either. Of course you have Ye Olde West, which honestly I think is really well designed and actually reminds me of a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote cartoon. Spooky Movie I feel like is the most absurd level design in the game, on account of I just hate how it looks. Once Upon a Time is fairy tale based with storybook elements, a goat bridge mission, which was probably one of the most annoying things about this world, and you also get to fight a dragon, which is pretty fitting, but I generally hated this boss fight because I generally had no idea what to do at first, because it doesn't really properly say how to handle the situation. Though I think the worst world in this game is King O'Sullivan's Mines, which literally uses the assets from Once Upon a Time, and also has a leprechaun at the beginning of the game, yet for some reason it turns into an ancient civilization Indiana Jones adventure. It's the most inconsistent world out of all of them, especially when I looked up the word King O'Sullivan. It's actually part of an Irish Gaelic clan, based most prominently in what is today County Cork and County Kerry, and was a well-known ancient clan of Ireland. And they use it as an Indiana Jones knockoff world, and I feel it's a bit of a disgrace to the old Sullivan name. Also, you fight a giant ancient totem boss by dodging certain attacks, so yeah, I definitely hated this world. And lastly, the Epic, which is half Egyptian, half Roman, which I'll generally say makes sense. Though there's no boss battle this time around, because by finding Scratch and Sniff, he'll ask you to collect these certain items so you can make your own pats of wings to fly into the Colosseum and enter a chariot race. And what makes this a little more insulting is, well, you can practically skip the entire Epic world entirely, because there are a total of 45 Edgars in the game. But in order to get to the final boss, you need 35 Edgars. Not including the last Edgar, which C.C. DeVille has, aka the final boss, meaning there's only 9 Edgars left in the game before you beat it 100%. Meaning first time 3D platformers would have a hard time trying to find almost everything in this entire game, and you can practically skip the Epic entirely if you wanted to. But we're finally going to get to take on C.C. DeVille, and we're going to fly up using the helicopter that Pinky and the Brain used to rebuild the water tower. And we finally face CC DeVille, not inside his air fortress, which I was actually really hoping, but by facing him in a stupid airplane, or in this case, helicopter fight, where you have to collect little thunderbolts and dodge his attacks, and then you boost and then shoot the engines off the ship. And after Hindenburging his ship, parachutes away to safety, while his henchman Jinx falls onto the cement floor and is presumably dead. The Warners, along with DeVille, get caught, and the Edgars are retrieved by off-screen Mr. Plotz and Ralph, and the game shows the water tower and what sounds like the Warners torturing CC DeVille, and nothing else. You see the end, the game is over, the credits play, it shows how much game you've completed, and I deleted the save file and I sold the game on eBay. Somehow even for less. As much as the game at play is actually okay in my general opinion, and the humor is good in the cutscenes, which honestly you could probably watch on YouTube for completely free, Animaniacs The Great Edgar Hunt is a mediocre 3D platformer. But considering that the main game in the US is worth $100, it's something I honestly would not recommend buying, especially since there are far better 3D platformers out there. Honestly, it's not even something I'd recommend collecting as an Animaniacs fan. But if you really want this game, I recommend getting the PAL region version of this game. Only if you have a PAL region PlayStation 2 or one of those special hacked regional PlayStation 2s, or you're better off just emulating the game. And I know I tend to be pretty positive on a lot of these games, though that's not entirely true. I mean, if you saw my Casper games review, a lot of those were pretty bad. I'm just disappointed that they made a game about the Animaniacs and it wasn't good enough. And its value skyrocketed over the years, that it's an item that's not even worth hunting for. But there might be one way to save this game. I would do it in a Animaniacs reboot style song, but yeah, I'm not doing that. But then again, they could just port it onto the Switch and charge full price, because that's always a good idea. Good night, everybody!